Hello and welcome to Harris Academy Beckenham Virtual Open Evening event. My name is Miss Hussain and I am one of the politics teachers here at the sixth form. This lecture is focused on an important debate circulating the political world at present, and it's going to be focused on the topic of, is democracy in danger? It's going to involve an assessment of the state of democracy in 2020, both in the UK and in other Western democracies, so that you can formulate your own opinion about what is going on with our democracy at this time. I hope that you enjoy the lecture, and I hope that you get a good taste of what it's like to study politics here at HABE. But firstly, why is it important to study politics? Why is it such a good subject to study? Politics, I think, is a fantastic A-level, and it shows you just how great an influence politics has on us as a country. It embeds deep connection with the political process and ensures that students have a greater understanding of the world around them. In my opinion, I think that there are three main reasons why you should consider studying politics at A-level. Firstly, I think that politics helps us to know our rights. So the course shows you how you can actively participate in the political process, which defines our society. Politics is obviously all about power and who controls certain aspects of your daily life. By studying politics, you are able to scrutinise this and kind of like form your own opinion and know what your rights are and how they should be protected. Next, politics enables you to have an opinion. So you're given the opportunity to discover your own beliefs rather than those of people around you and kind of jumping on the bandwagon a little bit, and see in much greater detail the advantages and disadvantages of our own political climate. You're able to express yourself fluently in political jargon and develop a strong mind, being able to kind of analyse what is going on around you rather than being dependent on other people. Lastly, I believe that politics prepares you for adulthood. So British politics essentially opens up to you when you turn 18. However, by studying it at A-level, you understand it at a greater depth than those people around you. We obviously can start to vote from 18 years old, which gives us the ability to change the nation and allow you to express your own political opinions more fluidly. So politics shows you what it looks like after you turn 18 in order to prepare you. It's good to have a political opinion. It's good to be able to have those discussions with people around you, that your peers and kind of like your parents and family, and be able to substantiate your claims. So the politics course is split into three. There are three components. Each component is worth 33.3% of your overall A-level. So you will sit these three papers. They are component one, which is comprised of British politics, and you look at British democracy and participation, political parties, election systems, voting behaviour in the media, and that is a 2-hour written exam, again worth 33.3% of your A-level. Our second is component two. And component two is focused more on the governing side, so how our institutions work. So we would look at the Constitution, Parliament, the executive, so the Prime Minister, Cabinet, how it all kind of works together, relations between branches, including the Supreme Court and the European Union, and again, it is 33.3% of the A-level and a 2-hour exam. Our last component, we shift to America, and this is a comparative component where you compare elements of British and American politics and governance. So it's a very big paper, and it draws on your knowledge that you have acquired through year 12 when you study this. The last thing that we do at the end of year 12 is we study ideologies, and we study the ideologies of liberalism, socialism, conservatism and nationalism, and they formulate parts of component one and component two. If you're interested in studying politics with us, which I hope that you will be because it is the best subject, you need to bear in mind that it is an essay-based subject. There is a lot of writing, there is a lot of reading, because you need to be able to do that in order to substantiate your claims and to be able to show what your opinion is. A debate is such a vital part of this A-level course, but it is not the only, obviously, component that we need to think about. So we follow Edexcel. But because it is an essay-based subject, you need to ensure that you have a 5 in English language and a 6 in a humanities subject. That could be history, geography, or religious studies. It does not just have to be history, but obviously it works really, really well with history. If you are kind of watching this video because you're not really sure about what your third choice of A-level is, I would recommend taking politics if you are studying history, if you are studying economics, if you are studying English, business, any of those types of humanities-based subjects go really, really well with politics. That's not to say that if you want to study 2 sciences that politics wouldn't work as well. However, it is good to bear in mind those links. So our lecture for today then is democracy in danger? Okay, so we are going to be analysing the relevant evidence as to whether democracy is in danger. I'm not going to give you my opinion, but I want you to be able to formulate your own opinion by the end of this lecture, so that you can maybe have those discussions at home, have those discussions with your friends, and see what's going on around you. So the word democracy then. The word democracy has its origins in ancient Greece. It is something that has been around for a very, very, very long time, but the nature of democracy has changed over time. Whereas there were only a handful of democracies in the early 20th century, by the end of the 20th century, it has trebled in number with the amount of democracies. Some people claim that it is the best political system, but if you're like Winston Churchill, you may say that it's the best of a bad bunch. So demos, the beginning of this word, means citizens living within a particular city-state. If we think back to ancient Greece, they obviously weren't living as a whole cohesive empire. They were split into city-states, and kratos, meaning power. So essentially, when we think about democracy, we're thinking of people power. So how the people show their power, what it is that they do to exert their opinion and to exert their influence. So from this, we can derive that democracy is government by the people, for the people. And that can take place in many different forms. It usually takes place in the format of electing representatives to make political decisions for us, which is what happens in the UK. But in its purest form, the most original form, we see citizens making direct political decisions, similar to how we do in referendums. Now, it's coming back up in the news quite a lot. It seemed to have died down a little bit with the coronavirus pandemic, but obviously at the moment, there's a lot going on with Brexit. And your parents or older people that you know will have voted in this Brexit referendum. That is an example of direct democracy in action. The government doesn't have to act on the will of the people. However, with a 3% majority, they did decide to leave the European Union as a result of that. So that is direct democracy in action. So when we think about whether democracy is in danger or whether democracy works, we have to think of success criteria. And democracy working can rely on a variety of factors. Our first is that power does not lie in one place, but in many. So if we think about some of the places which are not democracies, we might see kind of centralized power surrounding one person or family. Think, for example, the Assad regime in Syria is centered around one family. It goes down within the family. Power is not equally spread out amongst the country. Next, authority lies with Parliament, that holds the government to account and is representative of the electorate. So what the people vote for is represented in Parliament. That we have free and fair elections, that human rights are protected, which outline the relationship between government and the governed. And lastly, that there is active participation of citizens. So using these criteria, I want you to be analysing whether or not democracy is in danger. We're going to come back to our success criteria, but I'm going to let you know what the claim is that we will be scrutinising. So Sean Rosenberg, he is one of the most acclaimed political scientists. He is Canadian, and in 2019, he began delivering a speech to the International Society of Political Psychologists at their annual meeting. And he made a claim that made many of his fellow political scientists start to shift in their seats. Commentators did say that at parts they couldn't actually hear what he was saying because people were so animated by the claims that he was making. He began challenging a core assumption about America and the West. And his theory was that democracy is devouring itself and that it will not last. As many critics of Donald Trump's presidency may want to attribute this to him, however, Rosenberg claimed that he is not the cause of democracy's fall, despite some of his policies being a symptom of democratic decline. So we look at the symptom, we see that with open eyes, but we don't look at the system of what is happening to create that system. Instead, Rosenberg claims that we are to blame. So democracy is extremely hard to maintain for it to work perfectly. He claimed that society's elites, so the experts and public figures who help those around them to navigate the heavy responsibilities that come with self-rule, have increasingly been sidelined, and citizens have proved ill-equipped to run a well-functioning democracy based on our earlier criteria. As a consequence, he says, the centre has collapsed and millions of frustrated and angry voters have turned in desperation to political extremities or, in some cases, anti-politics. There is a massive anti-politics movement which is kind of taking the foreground now, where people are completely just boycotting anything to do with politics because they see it as corrupt. If those people are boycotting the political system, how can we say that people are being represented? How can we say that there is democracy in action? Okay, so I want you to think about that. So if we think back to our success criteria, and we bear this in mind as we analyse the current political climate in the Western world, okay, the aim is for you to analyse Rosenberg's theory based on the evidence from 2020. So our first element of success criteria was aimed on there being power in more than one place. Now, if we contemplate our British political system, which is similar to that of the Americans, it's certainly true to say that both power and authority lie in different places. We can consider the power of the monarch, so in our case, Elizabeth II, the executive, which is made up of currently Boris Johnson and the cabinet, and the legislative, so Parliament, inclusive of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And legitimacy stems from us. Being in a democracy, we give these people the power and authority to act in our behalf. So it's certain that we have the ability to elect certain elements of our political system. Of course, we do not elect the Queen, we do not elect the House of Lords. So that in itself could prove problematic in your description of democracy. But it does show that power does not lie in just one place, as we can associate with dictatorships such as Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and as I said earlier, the Assad regime in Syria. However, when we see headlines like this, so government being accused of giving their closest acquaintances lots of money in terms of contracts rather than taking into account independence, is it wrong for some to claim that those in a position of power benefit from the continual growth of power? Is it wrong to suggest that maybe people aren't getting their fair share? So this year, opposition MPs, so that would be the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrat Party, the SNP, for example, they have alleged that 12 different companies were contracted to provide PPE to health services which never materialised, and that resulted in millions of pounds. So this is actually being looked into by a independent law group. But what you need to think about is that obviously this means it is undoubtable that elements of nepotism and elitism exist in the British political system, and they always have done. If we analyse the extent to which power is divulged between power and those in power and their acquaintances, can we really claim that power is equally shared? Or is there this focus, this shift towards a particular group of people? That's up to you to make your decision. So Additionally, any working democracy must have a body that effectively holds the government to account. In Britain, this is seen through Parliament, and despite the differing views on the situation, it is safe to say that the Brexit negotiations have demonstrated a strong ability for the British Parliament to hold its government to account. Theresa May had more ministers and MPs resign in her 3-year premiership than any other modern Prime Minister. This is obviously showing that our legislative system is working, as it was effectively able to hold the government to account. However, you could flip this on its head and say that if these representatives are going against the calls for Brexit, then they are not representing the electorate properly. As we said, the Leave campaign won and Brexit was voted in for by the people, whether people are happy about that situation or not. However, MPs are not supportive of that, which is why it was so hard for a deal to be pushed through Parliament, which is why Boris Johnson called that election in 2019. So, something to think about. Are they showing that they are holding the government to account? Or really, are they showing that they are maybe not as representative as they should be? Our next one was free and fair elections. So, arguably, the 2020 presidential election is one of the most controversial elections in history, and that is reflective of one of the most controversial politicians in history. I think it's safe to say that this election will go down in political history as Donald Trump being the first president to have claimed that the whole election series was a hoax. So President Donald Trump is the 9th sitting president to have lost to a rival opponent in the re-election for their second term. That number is quite crucial. So 9 in 250 years demonstrates that that does not happen that often. What has not been apparent until now, however, is a presidential candidate requests that the vote be stopped due to apparent fraud. Now, if they are telling people to stop the vote, do we have free and fair elections where everybody can cast their votes and their voices be heard? The Supreme Court decision, however, to uphold state demands of withdrawal of claims of fraud can indicate the power of separate judicial entity within a democratic nation. The fact that they are saying that his claims of fraud are they pushed it out of the Supreme Court does show that there is democracy at play here. Our next was that human rights are protected, which outline the relationship between government and the governed. And another thing that has been in the news a lot in recent months is the Black Lives Matter movement, which is a political movement, and it began as a hashtag, but has grown to be a dynamic modern civil rights movement, which erupted in response to the 2012 murder of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of the man who killed him. It has gained momentum in the years that have followed in the wake of other recent shootings of deaths of African Americans in America, as well as racial injustice throughout the United Kingdom. And it's something that has really taken a leap this summer after the murder of George Floyd. Some argue that movements such as Black Lives Matter are signs of radical democracy in action. The idea behind this argument is that when people on the ground make decisions, articulate problems, and come up with answers, the results are much more likely to meet real needs. So by showing that these people are being are participating within the system, it means that effective change may come about. People also argue that it is a more sustainable change in the long run if people gain that momentum of getting these change. People are better prepared to carry out solutions they themselves created instead of ones handed down by national leaders unfamiliar with the realities in local communities. So by people participating, we're showing democracy. However, without equality and representation, would a movement like Black Lives Matter exist? If our system was perfect, if everybody was being fully represented, if there was equality of human rights, if there was an established outline of the relationship between government and governed, Would Black Lives Matter and other similar organisations need to do that? Is it not the responsibility of the government, for example, to ensure that everybody is well catered for, to ensure that there is equality amongst the people? Our last success criteria was the element of active participation of citizens. And many political commentators argue that Britain is in what we call a participation crisis. Since 1945, the turnout in elections has dropped massively. Whereas a turnout of over 80% of the electorate was common, in recent years, we have witnessed turnout falling and failing to reach more than 70%, showing that there is a massive decline in participation. Likewise, the numbers of memberships of political parties has massively decreased as well. There are many theories surrounding the reasons for the drop in turnout and the drop of participation, which you will scrutinise in September when you select politics as one of your A-levels. However, many people would argue that this is because people have become apathetic with the political system as a result of the two-party system. They don't think that there's anybody to represent them, and they just think that, it's always going to be the same party which comes into power anyway. With a confirmed win for Labour or the Conservatives, participation in the political process loses its appeal due to the boring outcome. And equally, many people feel that the government does not represent them. Instead of fighting for change, they lose both faith in the system and stop participating altogether. Without representation, can we really claim to be a true democracy? Or does something in the system need to be changed? So, what do you think then? Okay, so I want you to reflect on what you think based on the evidence that we have scrutinised today. And hopefully this lecture has begun to explain what it's like to think politically. In politics, we encourage debate and we assure you that there is no right or wrong way to critically analyse the situations around you. Everybody has an opinion. To have an opinion is to be political. And hopefully you have many opinions. I'm sure that I know that I do. We hope to welcome you or your child, depending on who is watching the lecture, into our prestigious politics course, and we look forward to meeting you. Thank you very much.